Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is Robin Ayu from the Localization Fireside Chat, and welcome to another recording. With this episode, I'm recording episode 262. So thanks for joining me along here with my guest of honor today, where we'll get to know him a little bit, get to know what he does, as we usually do on this channel. The interest here is the more we get to know people, the more we tell the story about these innovators, about these entrepreneurs, the better the world is. At least that's my view. And from that point, I want to be today, I would like to welcome our guest, Gerard Holland, who would join me from Melbourne, Australia. And it's 6 a.m. for him in the morning. I just found out we got him up early to do a podcast recording. God bless you for doing this. I don't know. But thank you for being with me at 6 a.m. in the morning. Appreciate it, Gerard.
Pleasure, Robin. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
And for the audience, just so I'll let Gerard introduce himself a little bit so you get the context of what we're going to be talking about today. Gerard is a founder of something called TalentMatch Africa. But he also built something called Intern Match and something called Global Employment Challenge. So this isn't someone who just had one idea. Gerard, you've been constructing the whole ecosystem around employability and access. So what caught my attention to today's conversation was not just placing talent, is you're building an infrastructure, real office setup, rigorous screening, full-time roles. In my opinion, that's a very different bet than most remote work platforms. Somebody like yourself who started this business is trying to make here. And I have to be honest with you, after 30 years of seeing like content, the global content and localization and language operations struggle to build truly distributed high quality teams, I'm generally concerned and curious today whether, all the times that we've been talking about localization and content distribution around the world, from your perspective, what you're building in Africa, is that a model for the rest of the industry that has been too slow to adopt or to copy or to bring on? Maybe there is an opportunity there for somebody like the localization industry. Hopefully by the end of this conversation, we have told your story adequately enough so people can make up their mind on this one. So welcome to the channel. Welcome to the conversation. Let's get into it.
Yeah, thanks, Robin.
Appreciate it, Gerard. So the first question is the following. Everybody on this channel get the easy question first. The first one is, what is your story? What got you here?
Yeah, so I didn't start off with the intention to be where I am right now. And
nobody does.
Yeah, exactly. But it's one of those things though, when you're, so I started life in the corporate world and in an accounting firm. And I spent about 8 to 10 years there, well, 10 years in total, but 2 years in the middle. I moved to London and I worked in investment banking for a little bit. I was at the Royal Bank of Scotland during the GFC. So that was an interesting time when RBS was getting bailed out by the UK government twice during that period. I still remember the day that Lehman Brothers collapsed. For people that were old enough to be working during that period of time, it does help shape you though. And the day I eventually decided I wanted to go and start a business. I was back in Melbourne and I remember having clients come in and thinking, I don't want to be on this side of the table with clients coming to visit. I want to be on that side of the table. I want to be one of the entrepreneurs. Now, I was completely ignorant and naive at that point in time of what it meant to go and start a business. But I think if everyone knew what being an entrepreneur was, no one would actually do it. So being ignorant and naive is definitely an asset. And I was an outsourced CFO. I was working, one of my clients was in international education, and I got to really learn about the experience for an international student from the lens that I was sitting in. And part of that lens was walking through the hallways and meeting actual international students. And I became really dissatisfied with how the universities treated international students in Australia. And I eventually took this business into the UK and to Canada. And the same rules applied. And the international students were really treated almost like second-class citizens, but they paid 4 times more than local students, but they had an inferior service. And I was like, well,
why do you think is that, Gerard, in your opinion?
Well, the way that it's set up in that the international students are full fee paying, right? And so if you go and buy a car, so you walk in to go and buy a new Lexus and, we walk into Toronto together, you've got a visa to work in Toronto or to be in Toronto and I don't have a citizenship Toronto, but you do. And they charge you 40 grand, but they charge me 180 grand. And we go and buy the exact same car. And that's how international education works. Like if you're a local, then you pay a certain fee, and if you're not, then you pay a fee that's much higher, and it ends up subsidizing the rest of the local students, and actually it subsidizes research is where money gets funneled. And look, part of it is that the universities can do it because people are also getting the advantage of being able to move to that country that is very desirable, and so they can charge a premium for it. But when they actually get inside the institution, the international students are sort of like treated like, yeah, you're sort of a bit of an inconvenience, to be honest. And so, long story short, I ended up quitting my job and thought I'm going to help international students. And I had a fight with the vice chancellor during this period, and I remember saying to this vice chancellor, "What's the purpose of a university?" And he said, "Well, it's to teach people how to think and to get a certificate." I said, "No, that is wrong. Your job is to get them a job." And he's like, "No, that is not our job." I said, "Look, if someone's paying $180,000 to do an IT degree, they want a job in IT. You have an obligation to make sure that happens." And I realized the unis were never going to make that a priority. So I quit my job to make it a priority. And Intern Match was born off the back of that. And we started doing internship placements because I focused on how do you get experience if no one will give you experience. And then funnily enough, the university started becoming my clients as they started to realize that graduate outcomes was important. I took that business all over Australia. I took it then into the UK and into Canada. And then in January 2020, I met Nelson and Winnie Mandela's grandson, a gentleman called Zondra Mandela. And he asked me pretty bluntly why I was helping privileged people. I said, "Well, excuse me, sir, like, what do you mean privileged people? International students, they're not privileged." And he said, no, what I meant was we need you in Africa. We need a model like yours in Africa. We have really high youth unemployment, particularly for females. I said at that point, look, I've never been to Africa, so I can't relate to this at all. I don't know. And then 5-6 weeks later, the pandemic happened and the world changed and remote work became acceptable, became a thing. The digital skill shortage started really accelerating and things started to shift. So, and I was luckily living in Melbourne, which was the most lockdown city in the world for most of the pandemic until I think Shanghai might have taken it over at the end. And from our bedroom, from our living room, we started working on pilots in South Africa and made lots and lots of mistakes. But it was my segue into looking at the African continent as a place to do business. And as soon as I could, I jumped on a plane straight into Ethiopia, then Rwanda, then Kenya, then South Africa. And it just completely blew my mind what was possible on the African continent. The level of quality of people, the proficiency in English, the level of education, the infrastructure was happening. It blew my mind. And on the back of that, I launched TalentMatch Africa. And now we have people working from Addis in Ethiopia, from Nairobi in Kenya, and then Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town in South Africa, and working from our office environments for companies in the USA, Canada, UK, Australia. They're the main markets. Made lots and lots of mistakes over that journey, which I'm sure we might talk about some today. Work from home didn't exactly work out very well, so we end up going and finding some of the best office space we could. And we're servicing clients that cover roles in technology and finance and accounting and customer service and sales support and legal support, logistics, operations, like all types of roles. And now, of course, AI is changing the type of roles that people want now and the type of skills they want. So it's all changing again. But I might pause there, Robin, but that's my short history.
Thank you, Gerard. I really appreciate the context and the taking us back into the inception of the company, TalentMatch Africa. One of the question on people's mind when they hear about a new company is business model. Can you talk to us a little bit about the business model? Who's your customer? What is the formula of service? What is the formula of TalentMatch Africa in terms of, what do you consider successful?
Yeah, so look, it's nothing revolutionary in terms of what's been happening in India and the Philippines in India 40 years and Philippines last 25 years. And I jokingly say that I compete against the Philippines every day because 9 out of 10 people I speak to say, yeah, we got some people in the Philippines. And as people didn't talk about it as much in 2019, it was like a bit taboo, but now everyone's very open to global resourcing. I had a conversation yesterday with a client in America. They're saying that, I know it was a client in Australia saying, I won't continue to hire people in Australia. It's too expensive. So, we're going to keep hiring people out of South Africa and Kenya through us, one of our clients. But it's just it's too expensive. So there's talent all around the world. So I'm going to look globally for my talent. That's a segue into what our model is that we have people that are augmented into our clients' businesses. So it's not a The client doesn't come to us, say, I need this product built, and then they outsource it to us and we go and build that for them. We will say, hey, we've got people with those skills. Why don't we shortlist people for you and put people in front of you, and you can interview them and make sure they're going to be a cultural fit for you, and they will augment into your business, and treat them exactly the same as if you've got someone with you in Toronto and you're living in Toronto and someone in Johannesburg.
They become part of the team, basically, right, Gerard?
And treat them with the exact same amount of respect as you would, no matter where they're located. And people are used to doing that now because, people work from home that might be 100 kilometers away, but they never come into the office anyway. So they're working remotely. And then we'll take care of all the payroll. We have entities incorporated in the countries that we operate. So we put people on proper employment contracts. We do the payroll. We make sure taxes are paid, pensions are paid. We provide the equipment, we provide the office space. And so we can do all the back end heavy lifting work, so that all the employee needs to worry about is making sure that they're looking after their team member, they've got the right management in place, and they're creating a good culture. And I think that's becoming even more important in today's day and age, that yes, we impact the culture for the people because we're providing the space and the infrastructure around it, but the client has a huge impact on the culture. So when they're engaging with them on online calls, are they bringing them to team meetings? Are they connected into other parts of the business? How do they talk to them? How do they treat them? Massively impacts that culture. So if the client can just focus on the culture, making sure that they're getting the right output from their team members, and we can take care of everything in the back end. And then our clients just pay a monthly invoice. And then if our client, for some reason, maybe they lose a big client, so they've lost budget, and they need to get rid of some people, which happens. Unfortunately, it's happening a lot across the globe in terms of general redundancies. Then it's a very easy exit for our clients, and we have to take care of all the labor laws, and we do all that for them. So it's easy in and easy out.
Gerard, for those who are listening right now and they're thinking about our conversation, the way you're describing what you do, and first thing, if they are like me, pops into their mind says, insources versus outsourcing. Why would they, what is the case, for instance, in this case, to select to deal with a company such as TalentMatch Africa versus them doing it on their own?
Yeah. And when you say do it on their own, you mean actually say hire someone themselves in South Africa?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yep.
There was a really interesting court case that came out. This was in Australia, actually, but it applies everywhere. But it was a law firm in Australia that had a lawyer in the Philippines that was working with them for 5-6 years. And they had just brought them on directly, were just paying them every month. Everything was good. And then they ended up having to terminate that lawyer. And the lady in the Philippines ended up going to Fair Work Australia and said, well, I want all my entitlements. I was an employee for this company, and I want to get paid my entitlements. And the law firm obviously said, well, no, you're just the contractor that was paying the Philippines. Now, this lady ended up winning in Fair Work Australia, and Fair Work Australia said, well, for all intents and purposes, that lady is an employee. Now, whether she's based in Sydney or she's based in Manila, it actually doesn't matter. She's an employee. And so she's actually been an employee for the last 6 years, and you've been paying her below minimum wage for Australia, because the minimum wage in Philippines is a lot lower than Australia. So you need to pay back wages for the last 5 years.
Well, that's a big deal.
Huge deal. Between the difference, you need to pay taxes that have been unpaid, the superannuation payments that haven't been unpaid, and you've got to backdate that for the last 5 years because she was actually an employee. Now, the reason why I raise that is that for companies that are just going and hiring someone themselves, there is a lot of risk attached to that. Unless you've set up a company and you go and pay them, you put them on an employment contract and you pay them properly through the local legislation, you're actually creating exposure because of situations that I just described. The advantage of using someone like us is that we put all that in place and the risk actually aligns with us. So if the employee, something happens and the employee says, hey, I need to claim whatever, the claim is against us. The client's saying, hey, I contracted to you, Gerard. TalentMatch Africa is where my contract is. We have to take care of all the labor law risk. I suppose it's frustrating for us because we have to deal with all that and we have to take on all the risk of all that, and not clients don't necessarily appreciate that. But having that differentiation is really, really important, and going direct has a lot of risk unless you're doing it properly.
It sounds like a typical business process outsourcing, in my opinion. Basically, you get the customer to focus on what they're good at, and you focus on what you're good at.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got
one
of our clients in Canada does training for driving school, a driving school business, and talking to their CEO was exactly that conversation, saying, "Well, I just want to focus on what we're good at. I just want you guys to go and do everything that's not core to our business." And if you can focus on what you're really, really good at and get other people to focus on what they're good at, then you can obviously de-risk your business a bit and help it grow.
Absolutely. And you're right. I hear a lot of people that are hiring people like in, what they call the offshoring, nearshoring, and there's like different definition of what offshoring is now. I lost count. People tell me like, oh, we're offshoring to India or to, China and a few other places. I'm not sure how attractive these countries are now, currently today in terms of offshoring. And when people are offshoring or, outsourcing work to outside of their jurisdiction, to outside of their countries, there are a few considerations. As you mentioned earlier, cost is one, but you want to be able to communicate with these individuals. You want to have like language, you want to have talent, you want to have skills. And you started the conversation by saying these are international students. So I'm assuming their academic skills are, up to par of where they need to be in a specific job that they're being hired for.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, with my background of my first business was focused on university graduates. And I've taken that into the TalentMatch Africa business where we have a big focus on university educated people. They could be early career, but we place people with 15 years of experience. But really focusing on that university qualified level of talent, and the advantage of being in markets like South Africa and say Kenya, they're not saturated. Whereas India is like, there's a lot of turnover. It's very, very a full market. The Philippines is very similar as well, very saturated. Whereas there's so much talent in South Africa and Kenya that is untapped because most of the world hasn't worked it out yet.
How's your screening work, Gerard? I know you have like something called rigorous screening. I guess I gleaned through your information for a company such as Talent Africa. And the reason I asked the question is it different from what a normal recruiter would do, or is it a specific formula you guys invented?
Look, I suppose no, not really. Like, there's nothing magic about what we do other than just trying to find the top 5-7% of people for every role that we're looking to fill.
Does it come to a knowledge of the specific region that you're operating in? A lot of cases, some of these recruiters are not in region. They're not in Africa. They're trying to do it from North America. They probably don't understand the region or the culture, etc. Does that play a little bit, Gerard?
Sometimes. So when we sit down with a client, we will ask them, do they have a preference for South Africa or Kenya or Ethiopia? Mm-hmm. A lot of clients will say, no, I just want the best person. So then my team of talent acquisition specialists will look across those three countries, because they're the three countries that we're in, and source from the best talent through the pipeline that you would, bring them to the top of the funnel and work our way down through we use some AI in our processes as well, but getting down to meeting with people, having conversations, and then putting the best possible candidates in front of our clients. If they don't care where they're located, once they've got some people though, say their first people are in Johannesburg, they then might say, hey, I want now my next people to also be in Johannesburg because I want them to sit next to each other in our office and we can build a team around that. So usually it starts off being agnostic to the cities we're in, but then we'll want to go very narrow to have everyone sitting together, which I highly encourage, because we all know that you do get a lot of benefit by people sitting next to each other if you can have them positioned that way.
Now, when somebody first reached out, I think you reached out for me first, and you cited Samir Ranjan's podcast that I did with him, and about AI fails about the point that he made, where AI fails when company never define what the problem is to begin with. And you said that maps out directly to how you think about global hiring. Can you unpack that a little bit, if you don't mind?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Like the amount of conversations I have where it's usually the CEO will say, "Hey, Gerard, we need some AI people." So, okay, what
is that how they do it? We need some AI people.
Yeah, what do you want? Says, "Oh, we're going to do some AI." Okay. So, like, Robin, what do you want? And then I go, "Look, Gerard, I got to tell you a secret. Like, I don't know, but I just know we got to do some AI." Okay, let's discuss this a bit.
Sorry, I'm laughing because it's true, and I've seen that same episode.
Yeah, and so it's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog. But when you actually then sit down with the execs and you say, look, what are you actually trying to solve for here? Like, what do you want to do? And we've shifted our model when it comes to AI resourcing, and we've gone pretty heavy into Claude and just sort of picking a horse that's winning.
Yeah, I know it's your primary AI training.
Yeah, I think at the minute Claude's winning, so that may change in the future. But rather than saying, hey, let's give you, and what they're thinking in their mind is that they need an AI engineer. So someone that's an engineer is going to come and use AI. Now, for people of business, so I come from the business side of things, and I'm a heavy user of AI, particularly the Anthropic products, and just like I've fallen completely in love with this product. Like I'll spend all weekend on it, and I'll have the greatest weekend ever. But now it's about saying to them, okay, well, what does your marketing team need? Okay, well then why don't you look at having a senior marketing person who knows their craft really well, who's really skilled in marketing, who has now been upskilled with how to use Claude and Anthropic's products really well. So look at your marketing function, and then how do you accelerate that function using these tools? And then what's happening in your logistics part of the business? What's happening in your finance part of the business? So rather than coming in and saying, I need AI, it's okay, what role do you need in the different verticals of your business? And then how can someone that really understands how to use these tools complement working in that part of the business by using these tools? And once you reshape it that way, then business is like, okay, yeah, so I need another financial accountant. But if someone knows how to use Claude really well inside of Excel and can help me use N8N to connect my accounting product into our reporting system, I can see how those skills could translate, but they have the underlying knowledge of their craft in the field that they're working in. And then you can get much better results. But it takes a bit of time to navigate that through, particularly with senior executives.
So, did I hear correctly that you train professionals to be AI native? And what does, when you hire, is that after you went through the hiring process, I'm assuming you decide to put them on some sort of a training program? What does the curriculum look like? And how long does it take for them to become productive, I guess, with these tools? What's your experience
Yeah,
been?
I think it depends a lot because people are at very different stages of this, let's call this AI journey that people are on. So I might meet someone that will literally spend all weekend building stuff and just, and you could have an accountant that has now built a technology platform that is solving a problem in their personal life. And so some people are like really, really curious about AI, and they become a bit obsessive about it. They're awesome people. I love finding those people. And then other people just log into ChatGPT and just chat with it, right? So you've got extremes of where it's up to. Where we've got our existing staff that we're very much encouraging to go further down the AI path. And people get sick of me saying it, but I talk about sharpening the axe. Okay, what are you doing in your job today? And if you had 3 hours to stop and you can go and look whatever AI tool you want, how could you do that job better? And like everyone needs to do that every single day, right? You need to stop to sharpen the axe. And so that is part of the culture of our business, is people actually looking at using these tools and then going to their clients saying, hey, I've got a better way of doing this. If we can use these tools to do this, we're able to cut this type of work out and we can create efficiency. And then when we're hiring for people, part of our questioning is saying, do you use AI? And everyone will say yes. Okay, how do you actually use AI? And if someone just says, I use ChatGPT to ask me how to make dinner, okay, well, that's like using Google, right? So you're in this bucket over here. Now, that doesn't disqualify them from working with us and our clients. But then the next questioning is around, okay, well, how do you feel about AI? Are you curious about it? Do you want to learn more about it? So I think the attitude is becoming more important than anything. I mean, attitude's always been the most important thing in my mind for when you hire people, because smart people will learn stuff. But with AI, it's becoming even more important because you can work stuff out, right? If you've got that attitude that you want to be able to go and do it. In terms of training, we're an Anthropic partner. So, there's the core training of the Anthropic products that you can learn. I mean, to me, like learning the old way is definitely the old way now. Like the way I learn is that I'll get on with Claude. If I don't know something, I'll ask Claude. And then when I don't know something else, I'll ask it again. And then if I don't understand, I'll say, pretend I'm a 4-year-old and explain it to me again. So you learn just in time now. Like this is the magic
By iteration.
of AI. And like sitting there and doing like a course online, I don't think that's going to exist in the future, because you just learn what you need to learn at that very point in time. Like this is what
Micro learning.
Exactly. And institutions have been trying to nail this for the last 30 years. In how do you have people learn at their own speed and their own time at the level they want to get to? And that was never been possible. AI has now made that possible. And so you can learn anything now, and you can do it to the depth that you want to be able to get to. So having people that have that mindset that want to do that are the people that we bring into our business.
And I did a podcast. I'm just about to launch it tomorrow. I'll publish it today or tomorrow. I don't know when, but maybe today I'll push the button on it. But and we talked a lot about upskilling, and upskilling using technologies such as AI, etc. And the dilemma that's happening right now, and everybody is look, everybody's got a job. Let's assume, unless you're unemployed, etc. But let's assume everybody has a job. So you're busy and you're working your job, normal hours, etc. So when do you take training? Do you have the time to go to classroom, pause your job, go to classroom, study, upgrade your skills? I think it's a multi-lane effect. So you got to be in different lanes all the time in order for you as an individual to maintain your competitive edge. So it becomes a lot more important to me as an individual to learn new skills, to stay competitive, to stay relevant. And one of the things that also I podcast about, it's called the defensible zone, meaning what are the core skills that I need to learn that AI can't take away from me? They will not be automated down the road. What value do I bring to this, whatever environment that I'm in? Job, knowledge of sort. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's too easy and it's not that complicated, it's not that human judgment influenced to whatever skills you're implying, AI will take it over. If somebody out there is still writing emails and is trying to craft an email and wordsmithing it for the week before they send it to the boss on Monday, well, that job's going to be taken over by somebody else, by a bot anyway. So one of the things that we are in the localization industry, which what this podcast started from or is now, has been talking about distributed, like distributed environment. So you've got a company, let's say in North America, they translate to, I don't know, 100 languages, and each one of those languages the translators exist in different countries, corresponding to what languages they speak. But the actual hiring pattern haven't changed that dramatically. They're still doing the same thing. What do you think keeping global companies right now from moving faster on the model that you just described? What's the holdup?
So sometimes there is a propensity to stay local. Now, whether that holds them up or not is a different question. But there's where we've started our business in Melbourne. Our people are in Melbourne. We need to stay in Melbourne, and that there's someone at the top that just says that's just what we need to be able to do. They don't have a global mindset yet. There are still a number of businesses that don't think globally when it comes to resourcing. Then I think when they do go down that path, my business went through this too, where as we started to globalize and internationalize our business, because we're founded in Melbourne, the head office, people in head office Melbourne had let's call it a superiority complex over people that lived in that were in all the other locations because they were in head office. And so there was a bit of like, we are the mothership. And then when it came to then building a really good culture across the entire world, there was challenges in when we grew the business doing that because there was these differences between the locations that people worked. So as people or as businesses are looking into other markets to distribute their workforce, having a culture that then sits evenly across it or a good culture across it is very challenging. Like we definitely didn't get it right as we did it. And I think that's a real challenge as you start to distribute more broadly is that how do you build a really good culture that people want to buy into, that people are pushing ahead in the same boat, rowing in the same direction at the same speed when you've got people all spread around the world. And I think the people side of it is always the biggest challenge.
Now, I know a lot of countries in Africa speaks English and we're able to communicate, but the fact is that Africa has over 2,000 languages with all of its, demographics, pockets, etc. And so but they have the fastest growing profession, as you stated earlier. There's a lot of international students, and I don't want to get into, or I would like to get into, why international students go to other countries to learn. I'm assuming there are universities in Africa, right? I'm assuming there are well established educational systems in Africa. But I mean, like everything else, I guess, people like to come to North America to study for some reason. And I still don't have the answer to that as to why. Is the education system in Africa lacking or lagging behind the North American counterpart? You've interviewed a lot of students, a lot of people in that capacity. What do you think the difference here between somebody with a university degree, let's say from Johannesburg University somewhere, and or a perhaps another candidate with a university degree out of Melbourne or Toronto?
Yeah, so when it comes to international students and that part of our business, the majority of students that we work with are from the subcontinent, from South America, China, Southeast Asia. It's actually they actually had very little African students that had come to Australia or to Canada for that matter. made that trip. It was all through those markets I just mentioned before. And I think previously, if we go back 7, 8 years ago and before that, it was because people wanted to migrate to some of these other
They just
countries,
want
like
to move to another country.
yeah, Canada and Australia. And doing it through education was a great pathway for migration. It's
Step
actually
forward.
changing. Yeah, but it's actually changing a lot now. Chinese students don't want to migrate anymore. And it's great. China has some of the greatest universities now in the world, and a lot of students are staying home to educate, and they're staying in China, and they're not getting the value anymore of going to Toronto or to Sydney to go and study, and then whether they stay or they go back home. India is going through a similar pathway as well, where a lot of Indians are deciding to stay home and get educated. The university system's getting better. And you've also got really fast growing economies in those markets too. So there's a lot of opportunity back home instead of traveling. So I think that's where it's hit in the international education side. When it comes to Africa, and so our business model in Africa is actually working with Africans that are staying in Africa and are working for a global company. And part of that is to not encourage the brain drain. So we don't want the best and brightest in Africa to leave Africa, South Africa, Kenya, wherever we are. You want them to stay because that's how you build the economy. That's how India became a tech powerhouse. And then in terms of level of education, the University of Cape Town, as an example, is the 26th ranked university in the world. Extremely high ranking university. And that was one of the things that surprised me, to be honest, when I first went to Africa and again started in Ethiopia. I was just so blown away by the quality of the English. Like, speak better English than me. I speak too fast. And the level of education, like young people that were going to university, the infrastructure that's available, high-speed internet that's available, it just has all the ingredients to produce really high-quality people. And then, as you said before, it's the fastest growing market on the planet. So the 2 billion people will live on the African continent by 2050. Every second person entering the global workforce by 2035 will live on the African continent. Now, think about that. That's every 50% of all people entering the workforce will live in Africa. So by default, it's going to become the resource market of the world because the average age is 19, whereas in other markets like Australia and Canada, it's in the 40s. So extremely young population that are educated, that are English proficiency, that are tech savvy and ready to enter the workforce. And so for me, it was like, it's an absolute no-brainer to focus on this as a market for the future.
Now, Gerard, I got to ask this question. I'm not sure if, how do you view this, but do employers in Australia, UK, North America look at the African market in a different way or different attitude when they view the African market? Of course, before you educate them, do they look at it in skepticism, or is there pretty universal sort of a sentiment that goes on now?
To be honest, if I'm going to answer that honestly, I'd say the majority of people, yes. And look, I was the same. If I think about before I actually went and spent time on the African continent, my vision of Africa was World Vision ads because that is the only thing I'd been fed for 30 years. Ever since I was a kid, I was watching World Vision ads. And I get it. World Vision's business model is to raise donations. They need people to give them donations because that's how they run their business. So if they were putting up videos of the best parts of Africa, who's going to donate to them? They had to show the worst parts. And unfortunately, that's what got ingrained in our heads. And so I have to remind myself sometimes when I'm talking to a new client saying, hey, why don't you look at having someone on your team that's living in Johannesburg or in Nairobi, that in the back of their mind, they're probably thinking, well, geez, like, are they going to have the internet? Like, computers, like, do they have any of this stuff? It's not necessarily their fault, but that's the subconscious that they've been fed for decades. And so to answer your question directly, Robin, yeah, I think there is a lot of bias that we have to work our way through and perceptions that people have. The way we have got around that, particularly in the early days, was producing videos of our people. And then they'll watch a video of this 28-year-old female that's got 7 years experience as a marketer. And you're like, whoa, that's the type of people I can get access to. I'm like, yes, there's millions of people just like this. So the videos became very effective. And then the number one selling point, though, is once a business starts working with their first person from Africa, they're 2 to 3 months in working with them. And often I'll get a call and they'll say, Gerard, this is so amazing. I've got another role coming up. I want someone else, in South Africa or Kenya. This has been incredible. But it's that first engagement that they're having completely changes people's mindset about what it means to engage with people from Africa. But we do have to get over that hurdle first.
You made a point earlier that some employers, for cost reasons, they don't want to hire, let's say in Australia, in Melbourne, they want to probably hire somewhere else. which is, valid business point. People wants to make sure that they have a good, efficient businesses running, and if they can get talent elsewhere for cheaper, why not? However, I think there is a still responsibility out there for those candidates, regardless of which country they're in, and specifically now we're talking about Africa. They don't get to be taken advantage of, meaning that we don't. Can you talk a little bit about that whole pay gap and how do you manage this conversation?
Yeah, and part of it's around the question about people going direct is that coming to us, we make sure that people are paid fairly. We make sure that their taxes are being paid. We make sure their pensions are being paid. You can make sure they've got the right office environments, they've got the right equipment. And a lot of our people are in the top 10% of earners in the country they're located in. Now,
Definitely, you don't want to end up like in some sort of a situation like, somebody working on sneakers in, I don't know, Singapore or somewhere, making like $2 a month or something. You don't want to end up in those situations.
Yeah, and also because of the roles we place with university qualified people that are doing, might be working in a finance team, working in a marketing team, they're in pretty proficient type roles where you need a decent
Yeah.
skill set to be able to do those roles. And then as people get more experience, they understand their value more, and you're having discussions around pay rises, and we'll talk to a client and say, "How's it all going?" They said, "I love this person." So, well, why don't we pay them a little bit extra? Like, yeah, I'd love to pay them a little bit extra. Now, when it comes to a little bit extra in compared to say Canada, Australia, the USA, for employees in those markets, it's not a lot of money, but for the individual on the other side, it's a lot of money. And we all know that the cost of living in different countries is a lot lower. That's why people went to India 40 years ago, Philippines, whether it's South Africa, Kenya. Cost of living is lower, so wages are lower. And that's part of the problem that is happening in some of these more wealthier countries. That the cost of living is just accelerating. So employees are demanding to get paid more. So businesses are struggling, and it's a pretty tough business environment right now.
I was going to ask you, how's the economy in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, it's struggling. Like, there's a lot of businesses. I think we're at the highest insolvency rates ever right now. So, businesses need to find ways. The thing about being in business is at first you need to be profitable, or else you don't have a business. And that's where a lot of businesses are coming to me saying, look, I actually have no choice. I have to look to other markets because I can't afford to hire people anymore because I'm running at a loss. And if I keep running at a loss, my business is going to go under. So I think
is that a signal to you? Like, I'm reading it as a signal, Gerard, meaning that the center of gravity of resources is moving from the North American continent and the advanced or whatever, the Western world, if to use somebody else's quote on this one. I don't know if we call it the Western world. There's always another Western world, some island somewhere. But the question here is the center of gravity from a resource perspective is moving to other countries. And it sounds like it is. Like, we're laying off people in Western world and we're hiring. And I've seen PwC, and I mean, that's not a secret. PwC and a few other companies, large organizations, do the exact same thing. Laying off 2,000 people or 3,000 people in Canada, for instance, and they hire them in Argentina. Not necessarily the same amount, but it's part of the formula.
Yeah, I mean, Qantas announced, Australia's big airline, Qantas, 2 days ago.
I've been on Qantas. I love their bars.
Yeah. Well, 1,000 jobs are getting taken offshore. They announced that 2 days ago. So, yeah, look, I think so. I mean, 9 out of 10 executives that I speak to, they have teams in other markets. And that's US companies, Canadian companies, Australian companies. Everyone has a team offshore. And I said earlier on in this discussion that it used to be taboo in 2019 to talk about it.
Yeah.
Now everyone's just open about it, saying, "Yeah, we've got a team here, we've got a team here." Like, I wouldn't do it any other way because I need to be able to manage my cost. So I think it is shit. The world is shit. I did a LinkedIn post, I think 2 years ago, talking about, I was having a complaint about payroll tax in Australia. We have this tax that as you employ more people, the government taxes you 5.5% of the wages of the people you employ. Now, as an entrepreneur, I think, how does that even make sense? I'm literally employing people in this country, and you want to tax me, you want to penalize me for it. And it's a tax that goes back decades and decades that's completely out of date. And my LinkedIn post was about, well, don't complain in 5 years' time when unemployment in Australia is 10% because everyone's moved their jobs offshore because you want to tax the business owners for employing people here. So as it gets more expensive, you're going to look to other markets, and then good for other places like South Africa and Kenya, we're going to hire more people. Not so good for Australia because it's too expensive.
I did interview Cynthia Deering from Australia. You probably saw that interview, did you?
I haven't watched that one yet.
Yeah, and so yeah, I we talked a lot about. She works in Southeast Asia, trying to help Australian companies move into that region, and We had a detailed conversation on the topic. It was pretty interesting. For those audience who's interested in referencing this particular podcast, you can look it up. And by the way, if you haven't done so, download the app where you can see all of our content together. That's a PWA app where you can just put it on your browser, on your phone, add it to your home screen. You're off to the races. You don't have to search for the localization fireside chat. All the content is under one logo. I'm cognizant of the time, if you don't mind, Gerard, and this is a very interesting conversation. I could have taken a little bit more time to talk to you about it, but I want to give you an opportunity here to explain to the audience who is your ideal customer. Maybe you are the ideal customer profile, the ICP that you look for in a particular customer. What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's ended up being businesses that probably have between 5 and 500 people, and it could be across any industry. We haven't specialized in industries that are open to having people located in Africa. So not everyone's open for that, but a lot of people are once they have a discussion with us or they get to meet people. And it's really thinking about what roles need to be located where the CEO is located, or what roles could be in another location. And we are doing a lot of AI type work now too. So people that are wanting to do more with AI, particularly with Claude, and are just open to having people in a distributed workforce, and will consider Africa.
And it doesn't matter the type of jobs they are. That could be manufacturing, IT. That could be anything, right?
Yeah, we've covered absolutely everything. So I mentioned
how big is your company? I missed asking you this one.
Yes, we've got over 250 people now that are working
full time
locations in Africa. Yep, and that's growing by 15 to 20 every month.
I was going to ask you if you practice sort of what you preach. Sorry to use that word, but do you have your staff in Africa? And apparently you do. Some people, they say, okay, we do, but most of the staff is in the Western world. So
no, I mean, I at one point had about 50 staff in Australia. It's now down to 7, and all those roles have moved to South Africa and Kenya. So yeah,
for those listeners who are interested in connecting with you and reaching out to your company, Gerard, how do they do that? How do they can find you?
LinkedIn's probably the best way. I'm on LinkedIn every day. So Gerard Holland is my URL for LinkedIn, and I respond to messages. Yeah,
for the audience, if you're having a hard time finding or unable to find Gerard and you want to connect with him directly, and you connected and you can find me, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to facilitate an introduction. That's the least I can do. And Gerard, I know we still have a few more minutes, but I just want to make sure we wrap it up correctly here. But is there anything else you'd like to add? Any other comments you'd like to add to this conversation?
No, other than to people that might be listening to, when you are looking at your global resourcing, and you probably do look to your traditional markets, could be India, Philippines, South America, but to broaden your horizon a bit and consider Africa. The talent is
absolutely.
There's plenty of it. And just pull your periphery open a bit and have a conversation and see what's possible.
Yeah, and make sure, like, when people are looking at Africa, which we pretty much articulated this conversation, is to, forget what you've been fed in terms of news about Africa, and let's make sure that you take an objective look at what Africa is today. Not the world vision of view of Africa, which is they're done for a specific reason, as Gerard was telling us. But this is a little bit more realistic way about what Africa is today. Modern, progressive, educated. They speak English, lots of resources. And one of the stats that Gerard, hopefully you guys did not miss that. The average age is 19 versus North America, which is in the 40s. So for that matter is I want to make sure we get those points in, so you don't just glance by them. Maybe it's a forgotten resource that you guys can take advantage of. So thank you, everybody. Gerard, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, maybe my last comment around that too. There's a lot of press at the minute, a lot of media at the minute about migrants, and I think Africa is being unfairly tarnished around that. But that's not Africa as well. There's a lot happening geopolitically around the world at the minute. But also don't let that taint your picture of the quality that you can get access to.
Absolutely. So I want to thank my guest of honor, Gerard Holland, for joining me today. I really appreciate it, Gerard.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Robin.
I really appreciate it. And for the audience, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the journey of recording episode 262. And I hope you join me again for episode 263. I think we'll record that one on Friday. For everybody else, if you're coming on YouTube, watching us on YouTube, thanks for watching us. If you're coming on our podcast channels, on the streaming channels, thanks for listening in. And just keep in mind, I summarize these conversations on my blog post site, robinayub.blog, where I archive them, and you guys can do research. You can fetch previous episodes. You can do analytics on them as well. There's a lot of data in there. I pretty much have, I think, over 380 blog posts on that site. So you guys feel free to browse through them and get the data that you like. And for me and my guest Gerard, I want to thank you all again, and I will see you at the next episode. Talk to you later.